we're now ready to start writing our Constitution test. So there's a few things we want to focus on. One is the fact that you only have a certain amount of time. You need 78 minutes plus your 30 minutes, and that's it. So you really want to be extremely focused, and you want to make sure that you do all your prep work. So we're going to talk about the prep work today. When it comes time for you to write, you're not going to have any notes, you're not going to have anything except for the documents that are going to be given to you without any questions on them. So you really want to make sure you understand the concepts of the three branches of government. So let's start off first with what we begin with, and that is the background essay, because the background essay is going to be the first part of your essay response. So if we look at the background essay, and this is where we have the setting. So the setting where it talks about where did the Constitutional Convention take place, what were they doing there. If you remember, this whole focus is on the fact that the Articles of Confederation did not work. So we look at the setting and why the Articles of Confederation did not work, and we are able to identify that. So we want to focus on the who, the when, the what, the where, the why of the background information. Then we want to think about, okay, how did the Constitution guard against tyranny? Why did they have to guard against tyranny? What was going on with the Articles? So then we make our three-point thesis statement. Once we've done our background information, very much like the Valley Forge, then we identify the three-point thesis statement. That's where your documents come in. So it's a question of how did the Constitution guard against tyranny? So that becomes part of your question, and your response is the Constitution guard against tyranny for these three reasons. So we take a look at the documents. And what we have here are the documents. We start off with document A, which is, if we identify, we just looked at this a little over a week ago, and this is the whole concept of federalism. So we look at the document. Once again, we want to make sure we know who's writing the document. You see it's James Madison. We notice where it's from, is one of his essays. And then we look at the actual text of the document. It talks about a compound republic. Okay, compound, we talked about what that was. It's a combination of states and the federal government, and how the powers divided between the states and federal government. And then we look at our diagram here. So we look at our diagram of the federal government's powers, the state's government's powers. How does that guard against tyranny? So what would happen if the federal government had all of the powers that the state government had? Would that be a tyranny? On the other hand, think of the Articles of Confederation. If the powers that the federal government had were given to the states, would there be a need for a federal government at all? So let's say the states were able to print their own money. We all know what happened when that occurred. Or the federal government, the states were able to declare war on each other. What's going to happen? Okay? Think of that boat going off the edge and down the waterfall. Okay, that's document A. Document B, we're looking at the document that talks about the accumulation of all powers. So remember, what happens when one person gets all the powers? What do we call that if one person has all the powers? We just went over that a little over a week ago as well. If one person has all the powers, what do we call them? And we go back to that word tyrant, somebody ruling with absolute powers. So how does document B, this idea of separation of powers, how does that solve the issue of tyranny? Okay, what are our three branches of government? All right, so notice that in the document it gives you Article 1 talks about the Congress, Article 2 talks about the President, Article 3 talks about the Supreme Court or the court judicial system. So by separating those powers, how do we eliminate the abuse of power? Document C. Document C, we see this diagram, okay? And it talks about, in the text itself, James Madison, once again writing, talks about dividing and arranging several offices. They may check each other, check being control, okay? So they have control over each other. So the legislative branch, what do? How do they control the president? Well, we notice that they can impeach, they approve presidential nominations. Think of Judge Kavanaugh, was just appointed by President Trump. They can also approve the nominations, they override a presidential veto. The president, in turn, can veto Congress's legislation. the courts declare laws unconstitutional that both the president and Congress make. So those are checks. If there were no checks, what would happen? What happens if a president decided to do these things that are unconstitutional? Who would keep them in place? So once again, we talk about that term tyranny. Finally, document D. Document D is the concept of small states and large states. Talks about the House of Representatives, talks about the term proportional, okay, according to population, and then it talks about the Senate. So think of our gummies, how some of you might have, when you diagrammed your gummies, how that was broken up, okay? By population, okay, so large states got the most, small states got the least. The Senate, everybody's equal. That's part of the New Jersey plan. The House, part of the Virginia plan. So hopefully by focusing on this and looking at, reviewing here, you'll be ready to write your actual essay. Focus on the questions here, okay, on the document analysis, and you should be well prepared to do well on your essay. Good luck.